Peter Hitchens has an article up on the death penalty, which I'll link to below, which I highly recommend, in which he provides some quite useful statistics. They are all for England and Wales between 1956 and 2004. Here is a part of his article that is needed to give some background to these statistics. The 1949 UK Royal Commission on Capital Punishment, which was inconclusive on deterrence and most other things, pointed out that deterrence was very hard to establish. Countries which abolish the death penalty usually do so after a long period of suspension, or when it is hardly used, or when the law is unclear. So the murder rates before and after the formal date of abolition often tell us very little. In Britain, this is also the case. The death penalty had its teeth drawn in 1957, and the annual number of executions in the final years of capital punishment was small. So the penalty's official date of abolition, 1965, is misleading. Then there is the difficulty of classifying murder. The 1957 Act introduced a category of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility, which got you off the death penalty. And so for the 8 years after 1957, this category of homicide grew quite sharply. Some suspect that these are cases which would have been murders before 1957. So that's the end of the quote. Homicide means all unlawful killings. Murder means killing with forethought. These are not the amount of homicides or murders that I'm going to read out. These are the number of convictions in these particular years. All percentages are rounded off. So in 1956, there were 94 homicides and 32 murders. 2 years later, in 1958, homicide had gone up to 120% since 1956, and murder was lower because of the introduction of manslaughter due to diminished responsibility. Then we go to 1964, 8 years after 1956. Homicide is at 180% compared to 1956, and murder is 140% compared to 1956. 1966, 10 years after 1956, homicide has gone up by 270%, and murder has gone up by 225%. In 1975, which is 19 years since 1956, homicide has gone up by 515%, and murder by 335%. In 1985, 29 years since 1956, homicide has gone up by 650% and murder by 540%. And in 2004, 48 years since 1956, homicide has gone up by 690% since 1956, and murder has gone up by 1,128% compared to 1956. Britain does a census every 10 years. In 1951, the population of England and Wales was around 40 million people. In 2001, that population was 52 million. If the population had increased at the same rate as the convictions for murder, the population of England and Wales would be 45,120,000,000 people. Yes, 45 billion. In 2004, there were 759 murder charges. 361 resulted in a conviction. That's a failure rate of 53%. Add to that the fact that medicine has advanced enormously between 1956 and 2004. Imagine, for a horrified moment, what the statistics would be if medicine had not advanced since 1956. One of the most basic of government functions is to keep their people safe. Another is to administer justice. How does allowing the murder rate to increase by more than 1,000% achieve either of those things?